Good morning, boys and girls. Today's math lesson is changing fractions to decimals, and this is lesson 13.6. Okay, so what you're going to be doing today is they're going to be giving you a fraction, and you're going to have to change it to a decimal, all right? Well, how are you going to do that? The first thing that you always have to do whenever you have a fraction, and I have a fraction up there, 9/20ths, you always want to try to get the denominator. You want to change that fraction, okay? Make an equivalent fraction, and you want to try to change it so that the denominator has either 10 or 100, and whichever one's easier, okay? So when I look at this, I definitely see that 100 would be easier to get to, okay? I'm going to go up when you... Okay, and so when I'm increasing, I'm going to multiply. So you want to try to always, that's the first thing, try to change this fraction so that your denominator is either has 10 or 100, because then that's really easy to write in a decimal form. Okay, so I want to make an equivalent fraction here. And I say to myself, remember how we do this? Okay, 20 times what number is going to get me to 100? Okay. You could think of your basic fact. You could say 2 times what number is going to get me to 10? Okay, well, I know that's 5. 2 times 5 is 10. 20 times 5 is 100. So I'm going to multiply the denominator by 5, right? That's what you do to get to 100. 20 times 5 equals 100. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. I have to do to the numerator. So I have to multiply this numerator by 5. Okay, and then I just multiply across. 9 times 5 equals 45. Okay, now this is going to be easy to write in decimal form. You have 45 hundredths. Well, how do you write that as a decimal? That's just going to be 0.4. You can have your 0 here. 0.45, okay? 45, and this is in the 5 is in the hundredths place. 45 hundredths, okay? So that's how you would do that one. I'm going to give you another example, okay? Let's give you this one here. Now remember, you have to think to yourself, okay, I have to change 4/25ths to a decimal. How am I going to do that? The first thing, remember, that you always have to do is you have to try to get the denominator. You're going to make an equivalent fraction. And you want to get that new denominator. Either has to be 100 or 10, whichever one is easier. Well, again, in this case, 100 is definitely easier, okay, to get to. And you're going to say to yourself, 25 times what number gets me to 100? I know that this is divisible by 100 because it ends in a 5, right? 5, anything that ends in a 5 or a 0 is going to be divisible by that 100. So you think to yourself, well, you can divide this if you have to. And if you have to do that, that's what you're going to do on the side. You know, you're going to divide this. Okay? If you have to do that, you have to do that. Or you could say to yourself, think of this as money. 25. Well, 25 is a quarter, right? That would be, if in money, that's a quarter. How many quarters does it take to get to, you could look at this like a dollar. How many quarters does it take to get to a dollar? Well, I know that 4 quarters equals $1. So 25 times 4 equals 100. Whatever I do to my denominator, whatever number I multiply my denominator by, I have to do that to my numerator. So I'm going to multiply this numerator by 4. 4 times 4 is what? Well, that's 16. Okay? Now I just made an equivalent fraction. These two fractions are equal. Okay? I changed this now to a denominator of 100 because that's going to be easy to write as a decimal. Okay, I have 16/100ths. What would that be as a decimal? Well, you write the decimal how you say it. 16/100ths. Well, 16/100ths is written like this. 0.16. This 6 is in the hundredths place. Okay, so there you go. Now I'm going to give you one more example. Okay, all right. This is a 9. I have 9/15. So remember, you're always saying to yourself, well, you're trying to get to a denominator of 100 or 10. You're making an equivalent fraction with a new denominator of 100 or 10. Well, I know 10 won't work. So it's going to have to be 100. But you say to yourself, 15, there is no number. 15, I can't times it a number by 15 to get to 100. It doesn't work because 20 times 1 is 20, 20 times 2 is 40, 20 times 3 is 60, 20 times 4 is 80, 20 times 5 is 100. It's not going to work. 15 won't work. So what are you going to do then? Okay? Well, what you have to do is you have to try to make an equivalent fraction that can get you to 100 or 10. Okay? So when I look at this, you're trying to say, well, I have to make a new equivalent fraction. What am I going to look? What are these two divisible by? 9 and 15. And you think to yourself, well, gee, I know they're divisible by 3, so let's do that. Okay? I'm going to make an equivalent fraction. I'm going to make a smaller one. So whenever you want to go down, you want to divide, okay? So 9 divided by 3, or you could say, what number times 3 gives me 9, and I know that's 3. Okay? What number times 3 gives me 15? I know that's 5. Okay? Now, I just made an equivalent fraction here. 3/5. 9/15 and 3/5 are equivalent. Now, when I look at this denominator, is that divisible by 10 or 100? I have a 5. Sure is, right? It sure is. And we can make that into, you could go to 10. Okay. All right. I know that, so then you say to yourself, 5 times what number is going to give me 10? Going to 10 would be easier, okay? Well, that's 2. Whatever I do to my denominator, I do up here to my numerator, times 2. 3 times 2 is 6, okay? This 6/10, how would I write that, okay? Well, I would write that okay, 6/10, because now the 6 is in the tenths place. So that's exactly how you're going to have to do that. So sometimes it's not going to be that easy, boys and girls. You're going to look at this denominator and you're going to say to yourself, well, I can't get it to 100 or I can't get it to 10. That's when you're going to have to make a new equivalent fraction. And your denominator is going to have to be a number that is divisible by 10 or 5. And you might have to play around with it a little. It's not always that easy. Okay? Then this new fraction, 3/5, can get me to having that denominator of 10 or 100. Remember, that's always your goal. You always want to try to create an equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 10 or 100, because then that's easy to write as a decimal. Okay? So that's the example of how to do that. Now, they're going to give you something else. And I'm going to erase this board. And I'm going to show you a little trick, okay, with this next step. They're going to say, they're going to give you a fraction and a decimal, and they're going to say, tell whether the pairs are equivalent. And remember, we know the word equivalent means equal. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, and then they're going to give you they're going to give you this. So you have 10 25ths and 4. Remember how we read this? 4. This 4 is in the tenths place, so you'd read this 4 tenths. So you have 10 25ths and 4 tenths. And they're going to say, well, is it equivalent? Are these two equivalent? Yes or no? And remember, equivalent means equal. So are they equal? Here's how you're going to solve this problem. The very first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to change this decimal into a fraction, okay? So I'm just going to rewrite it like this down here. I'm going to rewrite that. And 4, now listen to me as I say this, 4 tenths. 4 tenths. So you write a 10. That's how you would write this as a fraction. You write it just how you say it, 4 tenths, 4 tenths. Now, here's how you do this, boys and girls. Remember this little trick that we taught you. Mrs. Quigley and I taught you this. Now, to find out whether they're equivalent, you just cross multiply, okay? Remember that? So I start down here at the bottom. Always start at the denominator, and you cross multiply. 25 times 4 equals what? Okay, you multiply diagonally. So 25, and if you don't know that, you can multiply 25 times 4. 5 times 4 is 20. Okay. 4 times 2 is 8, 9, 10, 100. Okay. Or you could have said to yourself, well, I know 25 quarters. If I have a quarter and I have 4 quarters, it equals $1. Okay. You can think of it as money sometimes, and it helps to make it easy. But if you don't know, you have to multiply. You're going to have to multiply over on the side. Okay? So 25 times 4 is 100, and you're going to write it right up there. This is cross multiplying. Now I'm going to start the denominator, and I'm going to go diagonally. 10 times 10 equals what? Well, I know 10 times 10 equals 100. Do these equal 100 and 100? Yes, they do. Guess what? This is an equivalent fraction. Your answer to this would be yes. Yes, this is an equivalent fraction. 10 25ths and 4 tenths is an equivalent fraction. Okay. Let me give you another example. I'm going to give you a couple more of these so that you really understand. Okay. Here's another one. All right, so now, remember the very first thing you're going to have to do to tell whether these are equivalent or not is you're going to have to change your decimal into a fraction. So let's do that. I like to rewrite it down here. I like to have them side by side, so I'm going to rewrite it. Now, how would I read this decimal? This decimal is read 35 hundredths because that 5 is in the hundredths place. So I'm going to write it just like I say it, 35 hundredths, 100. Okay. Now remember, you cross multiply. Okay. 5 times 35 is what? Well, if you don't know that, and I don't even know that, you have to multiply on the side. 5 times 5 is 25. Carry my 2. 5 times 3 is 15, 16, 17. I have to add those two. So that's 17. Okay, that's 175. I'm going to write it right above there. 5 times 35 is 175, and you write it right above that 35. Now you start at your denominator again, and you multiply diagonally. 100 times 3 is what? Well, I know 100 times 3 is 300. Okay, I have a 300 here and 175. Were these equivalent? No, because look, the numbers are different. I have a 300 here and I have a 175 here. I didn't get the same number. They're not equivalent. So your answer for this one would be no. No, they are not equivalent. 3/5 and 35 hundredths are not equivalent. Okay. I'm going to give you just one more example. (16/20). I have a semicolon there, and then I have all right, 16/20, and this is 8/10, because that 8 is right next to the decimal point, and I know when it's right next to the decimal point, that's the tenths place, 8/10. So I'm going to rewrite that. 16/20, 8, you write it just like you read it, 8/10, 8/10. Okay, right. Now I'm going to do my cross multiplying again, okay? Remember, you start at the denominator and you multiply diagonally. 20 times 8 is what? Well, I know I can do my basic fact here. I know 2 times 8 is 16, right? And then you just add in that 0. It's 160. Now, let's do this. Down here, you start your denominator, you multiply diagonally. 10 times 16 is what? Well, again, let's just do our basic fact. 1 times 16 is what, boys and girls? That's right, it's just 16. You write it, and then you add that 0 in. I have 160, 160. Are these fractions equivalent? Yes, they are, because it's the same number, 160, 160. Yes. So I know that 16/20 and 8/10 are equivalent. Okay? And the answer would be yes, they are equivalent. They're equal. So that's how you're going to do today's lesson, boys and girls. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. All right? Have a good day.